Welcome to all learners. All of us have experienced adolescent stage and we know what are the thinking that goes on during this stage. Today's session is dealing with the topic understanding adolescence. This topic is part of BS 1-to-1 childhood and growing up, which is a part of B.Ed program. Let I introduce myself, Elizabeth Kuruvilla. When we think of the term adolescence, the derivation of the term, it happens from the Latin verb adolescere, which means to grow up and to grow up maturity. So, this derivation denotes that adolescence denotes the physiological development. But normally, we may think of adolescent stage as part of psychology. When we think in terms of psychology, adolescence is the bridge between childhood and adulthood. But normally this adolescence, in several related literature we can see that two terms which are used, that is teenager and adolescent. What is the difference between these two terms is that teenager, it is used in the sense of biological age, that is from 13 to 19 years old. Whereas the term adolescent, it is difficult to define in terms of age related boundaries. And when we think of these age related boundaries, normally we may say that it may start from 12 or 13 and it lasts up to 18 years of age. But is it possible to think in terms of age related boundaries? It is not an acceptable approach to think the stage of adolescence as age related. Why? Why this adolescent stage cannot be considered as an age approach? There are three reasons. That is, the first one, the variation in the age of onset of puberty. We know that all the adolescents may not be able to attain puberty at the same rate and in the same way. Secondly, we can see that this age is not a psychological variable. It is just a matter of time and it includes the various experiences that an individual occurs during this period. Hence, we cannot say that this age is a psychological variable, because psychologically there are different changes that is occurring in adolescence. So, that is an important thing. Thirdly, when we look the reason why adolescence is not an age approach, that is adolescent stage, it is the transition from childhood to adulthood stage only. So, here it is between this stage only, childhood and adulthood, and always the same pattern may not be following. The same sequence may not be following by all individuals. When we think of the term adolescence, we can see that how the term adolescence originate, that is important. So, here we can see that the evolution of the term adolescence, how it happens. When we think of this evolution of adolescence, we can see that this adolescence, as we know today, it is a relatively new phenomenon. The stage of adolescence, it has undergone a social evolutionary transition throughout recorded history. So, there is the social context as well as the psychological context, but mostly we may think of this psychological context, but that is not correct. Let me see how the stage of adolescence emerged, how it becomes a social evolutionary transition. When we think that the transition took place because of two reasons, that is from the pre-industrial society to the industrial society. Let me think of this pre-industrial society. What happens? There generally the individuals, they are concentrating upon the farm fields, cattle rearing, then cultivation, all those things are happening. That is happening in the pre-industrial society. Whereas during the beginning of this 18th and the 19th century, there occurs the industrial revolution, where we can see urbanization took place at a faster rate. So, because of this urbanization, there is compulsion on the part of the individuals to settle at a particular place and to engage in industrial works. And in the case of this industrialization, mechanization took place where it compelled skilled laborers. When it occurs at skilled laborers, there children and adolescents, they are taken away from factories. What happened in the pre-industrial society is that these adolescents, they are compelled to behave like miniature adults. They work in factories for less wages, and hence they have to do or toil as if like adults. But due to the process of industrialization, we can see that there occurs the demand for skilled laborers, high mechanized tools, how to operate these tools. There occurs the need for the expertise in that particular running of tools and equipments. So, due to this industrial society, we can see that there the adolescents are taken away, children and adolescents are taken away from the factories, and in order to get expertise in skill development, schooling occurs. So, what is the offshoot of this industrial revolution is that the schooling took place, and there also occurs mass public education. So, here the necessity of this mandated mass public education, it occurs during this period of industrialization, which helps adolescents to go to school. And more than that, we can see that due to reduced child labor, several laws were passed to restrict child labor. So, these two things marked an epoch in the change of the lives of adolescents. And the offshoot of industrial revolution, it made adolescence a peculiar stage where we call this stage as adolescence. Hence, we can say that this adolescence, it is an offshoot of social construction, it is the offshoot of the societal needs that occurs as part of industrial revolution. And we can see that this adolescence, how it is can be considered as a transitional stage. We have dealt the transitional stage in terms of the transition from childhood and adulthood. It is a stage between childhood and adulthood. So, during this transitional stage, what is the important thing is that when we think of biological changes, generally we think that this stage, during this stage, lot of biological changes is happening upon adolescence. Biological changes occur more rapidly than at any other stage. We know that the adolescence growth rate, it happens very rapidly. There is a spurt of growth rate in adolescence, and when we compare this growth rate among the males and females, we can see that the girls attain maturity speedily than the boys. So, here this is one aspect of this transitional stage, why adolescence is considered as a period of special transition. And secondly, due to the impact of this biological change, we can see that there is changes on social behavior. The adolescents entered into the adult social world. We have seen that this stage is considered as a period between childhood and adulthood. So, here adolescents may not be considered as children, or they may not be considered as adults. So, here they have to play a role in society. There is some kind of confusion in the minds of the adolescents. But due to these biological changes, the impact of biological changes on social behavior is more. Then thirdly, when we think why this adolescence stage is considered as a special transition is that qualitative changes occur during the adolescent years. The adolescence becomes capable of reproduction, and there occurs changes in cognition, peer relations, moral thinking and the like occur. So, they have separated from their familial bonds and they come into contact with their peers. They were largely influenced by the peers' ideologies. And in terms of this cognition, when we think, they are able to think in terms of abstract concepts, or abstract thinking originates during this adolescent stage. And coming to this stage, we can see that some developmental task each adolescent has to attain. What are the major developmental tasks that they have to attain? And before going to the varieties of developmental tasks, it is important to know what is the meaning of the term developmental task. Developmental task means the social abilities or attitudes related to development. So, there occurs several social abilities, how to behave in society, how to get along with others, how to think in terms of others' perspective. All those things is very important in this adolescent stage. Having Hurst has put forward 9 developmental tasks that is needed in adolescent stage. The first one, that is acquiring a masculine or feminine sex role. So, regarding the personality of adolescents, they have to make up with this gender role identity occurs. Second one, that is developing proper relations with peers of both sexes. So they have to get along with both sexes, how to make relationships with each other, how to get along with each other, that is very important. And thirdly, we can see that this developmental task, there is emotionally independent of parents and other adults. They should become independent and emotionally independent. They should not be always tie up with the bonds of the parents. We can see that due to the company of the peers, they became separated from the peers and get along with the peers. So here the parental attachment is reducing so that they can attain the emotional independence. Fourthly, what is the important developmental task is making sure that he or she will become economically independent. We know that when we think of the term adolescence, it shows that it is a stage where they are not considered as children or as an adult. And thinking in terms of adolescent stand, we know that they have to depend on adults for everything. Not only their day-to-day lives, for their schooling also they need economic assistance from parents. So here there is a necessity to make them aware that this economic independence is also important. And next one, we can see that they are going to prepare for a vocation. So after the 10th standard itself, they may take specialized courses according to their interest, their taste and everything. So here we can see that they are going to prepare for a vocation. And next one, the developmental task denotes that attaining cognitive skills that lead to social competence. So here the cognitive abilities, according to Piaget, these adolescents, they are able to attain this formal operational stage. It occurs at the formal operational stage, and the formal operational stage they are able to think in terms of abstract concepts. So these cognitive skills make them to get along in society also. So here the social competence of adolescence is very much important. And the next developmental task, that is achieving socially acceptable behavior. As they are in the field of society, they started making friends. So they have to learn how to display or demonstrate socially acceptable behavior. As there is physical change, the individuals, the adults may think such type of behavior from adolescence. Then coming to the next point, that is preparing for marriage and family. And when we think of this adolescent stage, we can say that there is the early adolescent stage, the late adolescent stage and the middle adolescent stage, then comes the late adolescent stage. During the late adolescent stage, these adolescents, they are able to prepare for marriage and family. So this type of skills also they need. And coming to the last task of that was proposed by Havinghurst is that acquiring socially acceptable values. We know that this adolescent stage, it is an important thing where they are going to internalize several principles that may be idealistic principles, but these socially acceptable values are imbibed during this stage. So, we have seen how the term adolescence can be explained. We cannot explain the term adolescence in terms of age related boundaries. We cannot say that adolescence is a stage that is specially related to psychology. There is also a connection between culture and adolescence. Let me see how adolescence, the stage, is observed in different cultures. When we think of this adolescent stage, we can see that this physical maturation and the process of social redefinition during adolescence may vary significantly throughout the cultural, social and historical context. Let me take how this adolescent stage is considered in different cultures. When we look at different cultures, we can see that the adolescent stage is considered as a coming of age. That is, they give importance to the puberty rituals. Through these ceremonies, the children are entered into the adolescent stage. Let me go through some of the examples of different cultures. Take the case of Samoa. There we can see that the adolescents entered in, the children entered into the adolescent stage through the puberty rituals. That is mostly the process of tattooing. Through this process, the boys may undergo several months, and for the girls that may be for 2-3 days only. And in the case of this Judaism, we can see that the boys will go through the process that is bar mitzvah, and the girls will go through the bath mitzvah. So here this bar mitzvah means the son of commandments. So this is a religious and social ceremony where they are becoming mature and it is demonstrating to the society. And when we look at this Nair community, we can see that the children enters into the adolescent stage, especially the girls. When they attain puberty, there occurs a ceremony known as Thiruvandu Kuli or Thirandu Kalyanam or Thirandu Mangalyam. So here, this Nair community in Kerala, that girls were bathed in turmeric and dressed in a elegant way, and they have to go through this process. And in Odisha, we can see a tribe known as Chuktiya Bunjia tribe. There they have to undergo 2 ritual ceremonies, which is categorized into 2 stages: pre-puberty rite and puberty rite. So we have seen how these puberty rituals are considered as the marking point of adolescent stage, and how these puberty rituals is different in different cultures. So we have seen how adolescent stage is explained in terms of psychological perspective, in terms of cultural context, and in terms of age also. And next we are going to discuss about the perspectives on adolescence. There are different perspectives which is revolving around the different theories. Let me go through the first perspective, that is the social viewpoint of adolescence. From a societal perspective, we can view adolescence as an important period of development during which children acquire the skills and attitudes that will help them become appropriately adjusted adults who can contribute to society in meaningful ways. Why this societal perspective emerged? There are various reasons for that. The first reason is adolescence is considered as a transitional stage, and today's adolescents are not required to play an adult-like role in society as in pre-industrial society. Hence, there are opportunities for a large number of adults to be employed in different industries. Secondly, when we look at the social perspective of adolescence, we can see that it takes a good deal of time to acquire the training and skills necessary to function in adult society. And thirdly, the third reason is that it allows the individual to learn other non-work related adult activities and skills. Not only the skills they have to learn, there are other non-work related skills. What are they? The skills such as the marital, parental and civic roles. They have to learn how to play these roles, different roles. Hence, this social viewpoint of adolescence is important. And coming to the second perspective, that is developmental psychology viewpoint. According to this viewpoint, adolescence is a period of experimentation of adulthood roles and realistic sense of the self. We know that it is a period when one begins to answer the question, who am I? And try to acquire relatively stable personality characteristics. And here we have to think in terms of Erikson's theory and Marcia's theory. When we think of this self-identity, this identity development among adolescents, Erikson has stated the identity versus identity confusion, diffusion stage. So, this type of thing is happening, identity versus identity diffusion. So, what is happening? The adolescents may not be considered as children, they may not be considered as adult. So, in between these two stages, adolescence is having this identity diffusion. And Marcia's theory stated about that this identity development of adolescence must be treated in terms of the attitudes, values, the interests and the like that they learned. Hence, Marcia has stated about the 4 identity statuses of adolescent. The first one, the ideal achievement. Second one, the forerunners that we can see is that they are happening, that foreclosures. So, the first stage is identity achievement, second one foreclosures, third one identity diffusion and the fourth one moratoriums. What is this identity achievement means? This identity achievers, the adolescents who has gone through this stage, that is identity achievers, they are good decision makers and are committed to an occupation and to a set of ideological values. So, we can see that here the adolescents values, their vocation, they are decided by themselves or these are made by self-chosen practices. Secondly, in the foreclosures, the adolescents are also committed to a vocation and to an ideological stance, but not holistically. They may be influenced partly by adults. Here we can see that after 12th standard, sometimes the vocation selection may be compelled by the parents. So, partly they may be influenced by the adults. But we have to be very careful that in such cases, perhaps the adolescent may become rigid and dogmatic in later years if their choices is decided partly by the adults. And coming to the next stage as prescribed by Marshall is that the identity diffusion. There is no commitment to an occupation or to a set of ideological stands. So, such adolescents, they are cheerful and they are very easygoing fellows. And coming to the fourth stage, there is the moratoriums. Such adolescents, they are those who are in a crisis where they are not able to choose an occupation on their own or an ideological stance. So, this is happening in this the development psychological viewpoint. And here we have to think that those adolescents who are able to develop a good positive self, they are able to adjust with the society in an easily way, they are able to get along with others, they are able to think in terms of others. And the third perspective, that is the biological perspective. These biological perspectives are considered in terms of the biological change that is happening in adolescence. We know that there is a growth spurt during this adolescent stage, and the girls may attain this physical maturation earlier than the boys. Regarding this sexual maturation, both of the genders may attain the sexual maturation. This sexual maturation includes changes in primary and secondary sex characteristics. Girls often are expressed to behave more like adults than are boys. Then these biological influences, they are closely related to the social and developmental factors. So, this is the perspective of biological viewpoint, and the last perspective, that is the intellectual competency viewpoint. When we think of this intellectual competency viewpoint, Piaget has stated that in his stage, that is the formal operational stage. During this stage, the adolescents are able to have abstract thinking. They develop abstract thinking. They are able to think two variables or more variables at the same time. They are capable of abstract thinking, and the adolescents are able to think about the thought processes of others and of interacting with the environment in new and different ways. So, from the children's perspective or the thinking process of children, they have changed to the adolescent thinking level, that they are able to think in terms of themselves and they are able to understand others' perspective. So, here there occurs the changes in moral thinking, and in views of the self also occur as a result of these cognitive advances. So, this is happening during this intellectual competency viewpoint. So, we have seen how the evolution of adolescence has happened and how this adolescence can be seen, the stage, how the stage has developed. And hence we can say that the stage of adolescence is a social construction. As childhood, adolescence is also a stage of social construction. So, in today's session we have covered the main part, that what is the term adolescent stage means, how adolescence can be considered in different cultures, how it can be considered as a transition period, and what are the different perspectives on adolescence. Hope that you have enjoyed this session. Thank you.